As is typical with the flies in Mary Orvis Marbury's book, Favorite Flies and Their Histories, there is no recipe for the great red spinner. There is a considerable discussion about the name of the fly, suggesting that the fly is the imago or spinner stage of the March brown. However, it's tied very differently than we would tie a spinner dry fly now, since this was a wet fly, fished as a wet fly. I'm tying the great red spinner from the illustration in Mary Orvis Marbury's book, Favorite Flies and Their Histories. I'm tying it on a number 6 hook that I have cut the eye off of so that I can create a blind hook. I've also made my own fake gut that I am lashing onto the hook shank. I used 6X tippet, which is spun and doubled over on itself to create that strand of leader that would have been the way that flies were tied in the late 1800s and before that. Hooks with eyes had just come into availability during that time, and there was a considerable controversy over it, questioning whether it was acceptable to use that new technology. And I suppose the fact that they didn't have all the modern contemporary tippets and lines that we have now may have lent to that refusal, since you needed some way to attach your fly line to your hook. So gut is the innards of a silk moth caterpillar that has been dissected, stretched, and twisted into a strand. I'm also using red silk, which would have been typical for the Orvis flies. I am waxing it with cobbler's wax. Has a couple of purposes. One, it helps to preserve the silk. Also makes it so that it sticks better. The fly has a gold tag as well as a gold rib. So I'm tying in some gold tinsel, and I am using some old metal tinsel. Very much, I think, the kind that Mary would have used. She and the tyers at the Orvis Company. Just a couple wraps to create that tag, and I'll bring it up. I'm going to actually bring it up over the body here. I don't want to create too big of a lump at the back here, so I'll go ahead and tie this off in front of where I tied it in. And then I'm going to take that off, and because it is metal, I can just bend it back and forth and it'll break off. And then I'm going to tie in a tail. There is no tail in the illustration, but there is a tail on the actual fly. The fly is on a plate, and this is plate Q, and those plates have recently been publicly, I could say, released in photographs in a new book by Steve Voigt called Mary Orvis Marbury, A Life in Flies. So I'm going to go ahead and put a tail on this fly, since the fly on the plate has a tail, even though the fly in the illustration does not. And I'm just wrapping up over the butt ends of those brown rooster hackle barbs to build up the body here and get it even back here. See if I clip out that little bit of stuff there so it doesn't get in the way of the dubbing. Try to create an even body. I don't want this thin tail and then that jump up in the middle of the body. And bring my thread all the way back to the tail. Go ahead and put some more wax on it. I'm going to tie in the tinsel again. I think that'll work when I wrap it. For the rib, more wax. And then I am using some red wool. It is called the Great Red Spinner. So the wax on the thread now is going to help this wool stick to it as I create a dubbing noodle. If I can get it nice and thin up at the hook, then I can do a little bit of tapering, I think. And it is a fairly substantial body in the illustration. Maybe a little bit less in the actual fly. So just set the fibers of the wool against the thread. Wet my fingers, even though the wax does help with that sticking to the thread. Wetting my fingers works to help me spin it or twist it around the thread. Try to take little bits of wool at a time so that I don't get lumps. Try to keep a nice even noodle. And try to keep somewhat semblance of an even body also. And then just leave some room at the front of the hook to tie in the hackle and wing. Take that gold tinsel and spiral it up the body. Try to keep my spirals evenly spaced. And then I'll wrap up over the top of that tinsel. My standard is 3 wraps over the top. Pull back on whatever it is I'm tying in and tight underneath for 2 or 3 wraps. And then I can take that, since it is a metal tinsel, and just wiggle it until it breaks. I'm using a brown rooster hackle for the front hackle, and I'm just kind of looking at the length of those barbs. I think they'll be fine on this number 6 hook. Go ahead and clip off the heavier part of the rachis and the fluff at the bottom. Pull down on the barbs at the bottom, at the base, and cut those real short. This is a crew cut, and it's not my term, it's one that I picked up from other tyers, experienced more than I am. I'm going to tie it in with the shiny side up. Cutting those barbs short helps give the thread something to grab onto and keep that rachis from pulling out when I wrap it. A little more wax. That's what I have to remember, is just to keep waxing my thread. I don't want to wax the whole bit and pull it back inside, because then it gets wax on the inside of my thread tube. I'll grab that feather with a hackle plier and wrap it, tying it in with the shiny side out. Makes the hackle barbs bend so that their bend is towards the bend of the hook. And this is the way we would generally tie in a soft hackle for a wet fly today. And I think the way, since the hackles are leaning backwards on Mary's fly, they did that back when these flies were the favorites in American fly fishing. I just wet my fingers and pull all of those barbs backwards, and then wrap up over the end here, or the rachis, and it's really the middle of that feather, and then I can just snap that feather off, and then that makes all those fibers lean backwards towards the bend of the hook. So having their natural curve go that direction, and then tying up over them and pushing them back gets them to lean back the way that was done for wet flies. And I did use a rooster hackle because I want the finer barbs than a hen, to match the illustration hackles. Try to split the top, create a little V up there to lay the wings in. For the wings, I have some dark gray waterfowl wing slips, or we call them also quills. And I want the tip of that wing to come back pretty much to the end of the hook. And I want to pinch that slip firmly. Those slips, there's 2 of them that I've back to back, and I've cut them to be the width of the gape of the hook. And I want them to sit straight up and down over the top of the hook. I pinch them there tightly, bring my thread up between my finger and thumb, pinch the thread, so it's called a pinch wrap, and then bring my thread back down underneath of the hook shank, and then pull straight up to cinch. Put a couple more wraps in to hold it. Try to straighten this. And I'm going to be okay with that wing. It doesn't stand up quite as good as I want it to. Wrap forward on it a little bit more. And one of the characteristics of flies on a blind hook with this gut leader is that you do get kind of a fat head. I'm going to reach in here and cut off all the butt ends without cutting the leader and without cutting my thread. And then I'll just wrap over those and put some more wax on my thread again. And come out to the end of the hook and just wrap that head. Keep those hackle barbs out of there and bent back so they don't get wrapped into the head. A little more wax will help hold my knot in place. And it's hard to tie a knot around that leader. So I'm going to do a half hitch. And what I can do is just grab that leader, pull it through my half hitch thread, and then tighten that up. I did catch a hackle barb in there, pull that out. Get those hackle barbs to lean back. And I'll do another one of those half hitches. I'm sure that Mary and the ladies that tied for the Orvis company got very proficient at tying these knots on. I have not gotten to that level of proficiency tying on a blind hook. I will just push my scissors against that thread to cut it out. She would have lacquered her heads. I'm going to take a contemporary twist and put a drop of diluted goop on that head. That will make sure that that knot stays. There is no eye to worry about, so no need to pass the hackle feather through it.